welcome back. On today's episode, we are going to discuss people pleasing and how we can get out of it, basically. How are you doing today, Lena?
Good, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank
You
you.
had a very exciting weekend with a
I
child graduating?
I did. Our oldest graduated high school this weekend, and so we've been in party mode all weekend. Sober party mode, of course, for
Of
all our
course.
listeners who know. But it's been really, really fun. Really
Good.
just great to see him accomplish that and get ready for his next phase in life. So,
Very
yeah.
exciting.
So today we're talking about people pleasing. And I used to think I was not a people pleaser because I can be a little more blunt and a little more to the point. And that was some of my ego covering up some of my sensitivity. And then the longer I've been on this journey, I've realized that my people pleasing just looks different.
Oh.
So I would love to know how you define people pleasing and how it shows up for you.
I am an expert in people pleasing. In fact, if it were an Olympic event, I would win a gold medal because that was my role in childhood in our family growing up, was making sure that everybody was okay and that nobody was mad and nobody was going to get in trouble and nobody was going to be hit, that sort of thing. So, people pleasing is actually an autonomic nervous system response. And it is a response that's designed to reduce tension in the relationship or reduce tension in the experience or the event that you're observing. And the reason why it happens so automatically is because your nervous system or my nervous system senses danger with discord or with anger or frustration. And so my nervous system automatically will jump in to try to smooth the way.
I really like that explanation, and it reminds me of something we talk a lot about in our program, which is the whole health lab. But we talk a lot about the brain has two imperatives it's constantly battling, or at least trying to figure out the need for safety and the need for connection. And so people pleasing really is trying to stay safe while connecting.
Yes, beautifully said.
Thank you. How does it show up for you specifically with behaviors?
What I realized as I've gotten older is that there's something that occurs inside of me that actually is not apparent to anybody outside of me. You and I have talked about this a little bit about how when we're having a nervous system response, we think it's so apparent to everybody. How it shows up for me is more internal, where I start to feel a lot of anxiety and tension in my body. And I will, if I'm not mindful or aware of it, I will jump in and try to fix something for somebody. How does it show up for you? Because you said it shows up a little differently.
Yeah, so for me, it's more about modulating my behavior to not upset the other
Oh.
person. So it's, like for instance, with my children, they all have different personalities. Obviously, they all have different quirks and triggers, if you will. And so modulating my own style and behavior so that it's not ruffling their feathers.
Okay.
And I don't know, I don't think that's clinically people pleasing because
Mhm.
I think that's parenting where you're trying to help them regulate. And so you're co regulating. But I think that in a social setting, I'm so used to doing that, that in a social setting, I'm also doing that. And it reminds me a lot of the mirror neurons we talk about,
Mhm.
where I am mirroring someone else's level of engagement or level of interest, or even topically diving in deeper into a topic that may not be as interesting to me, but I can tell that they are really interested in it. And so it is super subtle for me. And I honestly feel like the term people pleasing needs to be interrogated a little bit because what we know about co regulation and mirror neurons, it kind of begs the question, is it people pleasing or is it a nervous system trying to regulate?
Well, and I love your word interrogate, the concept, because it also can be we are engaging in a set of social skills. And so teasing this all apart, for me, what I see is that for me, the people pleasing is a reaction because I'm having a lot of tension or distress inside. That's different than engaging with somebody socially and listening to what they're interested in because you have good social skills. And that's different also than, meeting your child where they are emotionally and being aware that if you have a child with special needs, there are certain things that will create problems in the child's reactions and learning how to mitigate that.
I appreciate that distinction. I think what happens for me is I want people to like me.
Mm.
And so for you, you're feeling, from what I can tell, you're saying you're feeling like a sense of anxiety or tension in your body. So does it show up in your chest or your stomach or your shoulders or your jaw? Where do you feel that sense of anxiety?
It's in my jaw, and then you're the one who pointed this out to me years ago. When I'm really stressed, I do this thing with my fingers. Dad does it too, but I do
Yeah.
this thing where I rub my thumb in between my fingers. And, until I lived with you for a while and you pointed it out, I had no idea I did that when I was tense.
Okay. So for you, it's very physical. For
Mhm,
me, it's not necessarily I'm feeling a lot of physicality. I'm more, I hope they like me. So
mhm.
it's some insecurity, which is getting less and less as I get older, and which is such a relief.
Isn't it
But I'm
lovely?
wondering if for our listeners, the clue is how do you know if you're people pleasing or just simply co regulating and having emotional intelligence? And perhaps the clue we've just identified is how you feel in your body.
I believe so. For the work that I've done over the years, both as a clinician and as a coach and, as a person who's on their own journey, I see that the internal state is the clue for me as to what my motivation is.
Okay, so that's a great takeaway for our listeners. How does your body feel? Everyone has that anxiousness or tenseness differently in their body.
Mhm.
And so for you, it's your jaw. For me, it's typically either in the pit of my stomach or it's a tightness in my chest.
Uh-huh.
And I'll often find myself without realizing it, either doing this,
Mhm.
where I've just kind of crossed an arm and it's like a protective stance subconsciously, or I'll actually kind of rub right here
Mhm.
or rub my legs.
Yes.
And so paying attention, again, being very aware of our body, and that is going to be a clue whether we are engaging in people pleasing or not.
And if I can, Amy, add a little bit about this. We have seen people pleasing in recent years as being pathological. And that doesn't match up with co regulation. It doesn't match up with the concept of mirror neurons. It doesn't match up with um, an autonomic nervous system response. And I want our listeners to understand that whatever behavior you engage in autonomically, which is also automatic, instead of being angry with yourself, it's important to understand that your brain helped you develop that coping mechanism to help you survive. And that if you engage in people pleasing behaviors, it's something that you learned most likely as a child, and it kept you from being hit as often, or it kept you from being disregarded or rejected as often, that type of thing. And I really want us to start as a whole, a human race, to to stop pathologizing all these things that our brains did automatically to help us get through difficult times in our childhood.
I absolutely love that, and I know we've talked about that with other topics such as codependency
Mhm,
and this need to recognize our resilience and our
mhm.
survival, and that all of these maladaptive practices were practices to get us to this point, and they were great, and they're not serving us anymore.
Right.
And so if they're not serving us anymore, then it's time to take a look at them and get curious.
And I love that you said that because that is very agentive. Taking a look at something and deciding consciously whether or not we want to address it, that is always what we're looking for our listeners, that they will understand that awareness offers you choice. And it's okay to choose something different than what you think other people want you to choose. The key is to have awareness so that you're making a choice that's not shadowed by um, denial or by other things like that.
Absolutely. And I'm aware that the other way people pleasing has shown up for me is the inability to say no to certain commitments because I want to be the good mom or the good friend or the good sister. And so, we've talked in other podcast episodes about just creating some space between the time we volunteer for something or commit to something. That space between being asked and answering. And so, what that looks like for me is if someone says, "Can you do this?" I say, "Let me get back to you," and I genuinely think, "Will this be within my bandwidth that day?" I had that happen this weekend. I had someone text me and say, "I understand you're coming to the meeting. Can you please do this?" And I got back to them. At first, I was going to say, "Okay," but I didn't know I was supposed to be at a meeting. The person forgot to ask me. And so I was going to go ahead and just do it because that's what a, quote unquote, good friend does or a good mom or whatever.
Mhm,
But I took a couple minutes and then I just said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about the meeting. I won't be able to make it." And I felt so much relief.
mhm.
Normally, if my husband had been in town and we weren't graduation weekend, I probably that would have not been hard for me and I could have easily done it and I would have gladly done it. But that particular day, it was stretching my bandwidth to the point where I knew what would happen is I would be taking it out on my loved ones.
Oh, I love that. I was just thinking right when you said that, that what we tend to do in situations like that is we tend to want to please the people outside of our immediate circle, and so then the people inside our immediate circle get a person in ourselves that's less resourced and has less capacity, and so they end up paying the price so that we can look good.
Absolutely. And my commitment this year above anything is to not yell, not raise my voice to my children. And I'm doing so well. I'm
You are.
so proud of myself. I can tell that my bandwidth is expanding in terms of my parenting skills. We're going to family counseling and that's really helping me. And I don't want to jeopardize my relationship with them because it's really going so well, and that's
Mhm.
hard when you have a lot of teenagers.
Yes, it is.
So,
And you have
I
3.
yes. Yeah, and 2 who think they're teenagers, yes. Yeah, so I just wanted to let our listeners know that sometimes people pleasing may show up differently for them,
Mhm.
and there are times where you think, "Well, it won't hurt if I just say yes to this," but there are consequences, and it's typically taken out on our loved ones.
Beautifully said.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this. And if you are curious about people pleasing and our view of how it can get pathologized or placed in a category where it's considered completely negative, and you have more questions about nervous system regulation and the window of tolerance, and all of the things we talk about in our episodes, please reach out at hello at Mending Trauma or on Instagram at Mending Trauma. We would love to converse and hear your thoughts, and we hope you'll join us next week.